pleasure to invite up CFDR member Daryl Green to the front to introduce our panelists and begin tonight's courageous conversation. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, President Jackson. Excuse me. Well, welcome. Glad all of you could make it. Hoping for a little bigger crowd. Last time we did something like this a few years ago about the system, the justice system, we had a huge crowd. It was overflowing. But apparently we've had some communications issues for this particular one. But the last one we talked about at our courageous conversation was about the justice system and issues that we had that some of our citizens had with the justice system. So we talked about that in depth. We had a lot of local officials there for that particular meeting, and I thought it was very interesting, and we learned a lot of things about the system that we didn't know before. So this time the committee got together, Primary Adeline and Terry, and decided that let's talk about the folks that have been to prison, and now they came out, and let's talk about the types of barriers that they had to face when they got out to reintegrate themselves back into our society. And it's not an easy system. I mean, and it's not easy to do that. So we wanted to get some folks that had experienced it and talk to us about what their experiences were, what they had to do to readjust, to get back, be accepted back into our society as an individual. So we have three courageous and wonderful panelists tonight that are joining us. All three of them have been incarcerated, and they're going to tell you their journey about what they experienced once they got out, released from incarceration. And I want to introduce them. I'm not going to read the bios because they're on the back of the flyer that you received. We pressed for time, but I'm going to give you their names, and then each one of them is going to talk a little bit about their journey into the system, and then the journey, what they had to do as they came out of the system, how they had to readjust the barriers that they faced when they got out of the system. And then after they finish that, we have some specific questions we want to ask them. And then after we ask our questions, if we don't ask the question that you might want to hear, put it on a piece of paper and send it up here, and we'll hopefully get around to asking that question, and hopefully the panelists can answer. But tonight we have, joining us tonight, we'll start with Carl Fields. Carl, would you raise your hand, sir? Now, Carl was with us last time, gave us a lot of powerful information about the system as he saw it, and boy, there was a lot of tough discussions after that presentation that he gave us last time. The second individual is one of our own folks, and that's Sharmain Harris. Sharmain, would you raise your hand, please? And Sharmain's going to talk a little bit about his journey, and I think they've already mentioned that there's potential prizes after this is over with for people here that will be able to receive one of Sharmain's books that he's written about his journey that he's faced. So hopefully you get to win one of those. And then the last but not least, in fact, we were just so happy to get this individual on our panel, Hope Wesley-Early. And Hope works for the Racine Kenosha Vocational Ministry over in primarily in Racine. And it was just so wonderful to be able to bring a female on the panel so we could hear a different perspective, not just the men, but some of the issues and challenges that women face when they come out of the system, so the prison system. So I'm not going to take any more time. I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. They've got their instructions on how long they can talk, and hopefully they'll give you a brief journey on what they and their families, and children, and those kinds of things had to go endure either before or after they were incarcerated. So without further ado, we'll start with Mr. Carl Fields.
Thank you. Thank you, my mission if I choose to accept it. Yes. So I'm a Racinian for all you Kenosha folks. You know what that means. It means that I'm a guest here, so I appreciate your kindness in receiving us tonight. I started pretty early in what they call messing up, becoming a knucklehead, getting in trouble. Didn't have a sense of how to navigate that, at least navigate that well. And my story is one of the intense ones that you'll hear tonight because I landed myself in prison at age 20. I released at 36. That was 10 years ago now. I know I don't look like an old man at this point. I say that for a couple of reasons. One, when I went to prison and I started, it was year one with 17 to go, and I had no idea how to navigate that in a way that made sense, in a way that would enrich me as a person, nor did I get any of those kinds of instructions from the professionals who worked there. Now, that's not a knock on them, but it is accurate characterization of what happened. And I landed in a system when it was beginning to burst at the seams and be overcrowded. And so the kinds of resources that we look to have in the system for people who are in the system can't always be present because the pressing matter is the pressing need of there being too many people. And so that always takes the priority and everything else took a back seat. So learning that, seeing that, I knew early on that I was going to have to take control of my curriculum and my educational trajectory while I was in prison. And so I did that. Got into programming early when I was still in maximum security prison, which almost never happens. I ended up in medium security prison. They kicked me out of max because I was doing well. I learned while being in medium security prison that almost no one there had their programming done. So they asked me to come and work for the program. And I went from working for the program as a tutor to become an assistant to facilitate programs in the organization or in the institution. And that, you really want to learn something, teach it to somebody else while you're learning it, walk with it, etc. And so it stuck. And so for over a decade, I did that while I was inside. And I took a lot of hits while doing so because a lot of my peers thought, well, this is just prison talk, and this is just what you do while you're in prison, and you're trying to make it look good, you're also trying to kiss butt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, no, it's like something to this cognitive intervention stuff. Something to this. So I was like, I don't know how to quite explain it to you in a way that
And
makes
Carl,
sense.
I'm hearing that here. We're going to try to get that turned up a little
All
bit.
right.
In the meantime, if you can project as if you don't have a mic, and I apologize, but I see a number of them trying to hear. I'll look for, to see if there's a way to go between them.
I can do that, yes.
Oh, good. I've done that.
All right. Well, see, look at that. Technical difficulties, not me as a person. I feel vindicated. So what I appreciate about learning that and doing that was that I picked up a lot of different skills, both soft skills, technical skills, that had some real utility for me as a person, and they helped to make me hireable when I was released. I didn't know that. I just wanted to do something different. So my particular training, and as they say in my favorite movie, I don't have much money, but what I do have is a certain set of skills. I got those skills while I was inside, which I'm grateful for. And then I transitioned, and it still wasn't enough. When I came home 10 years ago, I barely had 2 nickels to rub together, and I still couldn't get a job. I was a person who had a particular injury, so I couldn't do a physical job. And those were the jobs that were offered to people like myself, manual labor jobs, hard labor jobs, and I couldn't do that because I had a back injury. And the jobs for which a technical proficiency was needed or acknowledged, those were the jobs that wouldn't accept me because I had a record, I had a background, and I had been gone. For the few of those jobs who would hear me out and interview me even, they then said that I was unable to be hired by them because I had been gone for too long. I had a good resume, I presented well, I was articulate, as they would say. And so they were willing to at least hear me out. But when I told them how long I had been gone, they were shocked. They assumed that I had been gone for 18 months. They assumed that I had been gone for 24 months. They assumed that my background with the way that I was presenting myself so well in this interview, that I clearly was in the nonviolent, low-risk category of convicted people. And I wasn't. And so because of that, bias immediately kicked in, but also people who were genuine and honest to say, I would love to hire you, but I would take too many hits for doing so. And so there I was in my journey, fresh out, couldn't get a job, and unfortunately I wasn't injured enough, according to the paperwork, to receive disability benefits. And so there I was, month 8, month 9, month 10, couldn't get a job. And that's when it hit me, like, oh, this is why recidivism looks the way it does. This is why. Like, at month 10 of being home, after serving almost 2 decades and still couldn't get a job, it clicked. Like, this is why a lot of my peers make the choices that they do, because some of them don't have any other choice. And I had some luck. I met quite a few people. I appreciate one of them being here now. Hi, Terry. Ms. Wallen back there is a dear friend of mine, because in terms of community, she was one of those people who heard my story, met me, walked with me for months from the start through the jobs program, and also got a sense to suss out my authenticity and what I was speaking about and what I was trying to do, and said, you know what, I got a spot for you. I don't know what can come of it, but I know you need to be with this particular group of people to get some conversations going. And for those who do know me, I'm the former shelter director of the Hospitality Center, and the only reason I landed there was because I sat at her desk and she said, I'm going to introduce you to the people there to get you a volunteer opportunity, because I couldn't volunteer anywhere, because I had been gone too long, and again, I wasn't in that category of people who are already deemed safe. And so I had to make an argument, a logical argument, to say, if I've been gone for almost 20 years, and I've done all the programming that prison had to offer to me, I taught all the programming that prison had to offer to other people, how is that still not enough? If that wasn't enough, then why just send me in the first place and call it corrections? And so I put that argument in front of enough people, and folks at some point say, you know what, you're right, we gotta start calling it what it is, and holding the system accountable as well, and not just holding the person accountable. I said, because if that's the case, I've been held accountable, and I still can't transition. And so my shot came from being genuine in that, being committed to that no matter what, and then opportunities opened up. And so I landed a job, I landed a volunteer opportunity at a particular place. I ended up landing a job there, and I stayed there for years. And I worked that job. And I worked it because it was the place who was willing to not just hear me out, but give me a shot when nobody else would. And so, ironically, after that started to pan out and play out well, I got all kinds of job offers after that. And I turned down every single one of them, because like, no, you're not a good fit for me. I am where I need to be right now. And I'm gonna make as much noise as I possibly can from this position. And so I get that question a lot too in my journey. Why did I stay so long? I stayed so long because they invested in me when nobody else would. And so I didn't feel obligated. I felt honored to reciprocate that. And so I share that with you because each and every person who we remove from the community for safety reasons, for punishment reasons, has a story. And when they come back, they have a story. And whether we see it or not, their story is part of our story. Because they're coming back to the community and they have to live somewhere, they have to be somewhere. If we build a community that doesn't allow for a person to be or live or work anywhere, then we know what we're gonna get. And we know what's gonna come with that. So, story number 1.
coming over a cold here, but I'm gonna do my best. So, as y'all heard, Sharmain Harris, always start with I'm a proud father of 3 children and a husband to my beautiful wife. So let me take y'all back a little bit. I'm a Kenoshan, and funny thing is, I was actually born here but raised in Racine, Wisconsin. So
They're gonna know that way.
early,
They're gonna learn that. That's why I didn't say it.
early in my life, went through some rough times, born 1988, so around the time I was 10, it was 98, so think about the times happening, a lot of mass incarceration movements kind of started and kind of flourishing at that time. So I always shared a story about how when I was about 11 years old, I walked around my neighborhood asking everybody for $1 for my birthday. And, I was racking them dollars up and, loading them up. I was $20 about to go to the store and get a bunch of candy, get everything I could. But one brother, came and said, hey, young man, or he didn't call me a young man, but he said, stop begging people for money. Here, take these 2 bags of crack cocaine and sell them. This is how real men make money, right? So when I share that, I often get the shocked response, but I often ask the audience to think a little further and ask yourself, where did he learn it from? Why was this so normal to him, right? And so the conditions in which we was raised in, and when you think about the times where a lot of work disappeared and factories was kind of moving, people resorted to the opportunities that was in front of them, good or bad. And so in the midst of all of that, I went through a rough kind of custody battle, and I want to share the roots with y'all so y'all can see where like a lot of youth, a lot of young boys, young girls have their problems, and then they end up in a situation where we got to start reentry initiatives and things like that. I'm a huge proponent of starting a no-entry initiative. How about we don't put them in the system in the first place, but I'll talk about that later. Mom and dad, from what I know, was never together. My dad would be mad if I said this if he was here, but I always joke that I believe I was a one-night stand baby for my grown folks here. Never seen my parents together, but my father was going through his situation, and my father was incarcerated as well around that same time that I was 10, 11 years old, transitioning from elementary to middle school. That time where you start smelling yourself and you start to, you're getting whoopings from your mama, but at this age I can grab the belt down, like, Mom, chill out. I'm taller than you now, right? So Dave was going through some things, but my father, eventually got himself together, found God in prison, came back, and his number one thing was to get me, his oldest son, in his custody. And so he would come and visit me and pick me up. I would come to Kenosha and, be with my brothers and sisters and my dad's wife at the time. And, go through this whole transition, but eventually we got to a point where my father won custody over me, went through this process talking to social workers and guardian ad litems, and I'm 12 years old sitting in a room alone feeling like I'm being interrogated. And they asked me questions about my mom and her living situation and where I come from. You don't tell them white people nothing. But I did, and I felt like my mom hated me for the longest time because my dad won, and part of it was because I told part of the truth on my living situation. So fast forward, moved with my dad. Things changed. My dad is very active. I used to always say, like, man, I can't get rid of this guy. Coming to school, conferences, doing everything that he's supposed to do, but I was rebellious. I didn't respect him. You think you're gonna just come in my life and it's gonna be that easy? And so, went through this battle with him, and then that's where some of the behavior issues that I went through in Racine still was rooted in me when I came to Kenosha. Although I had my father and a little more support around me, I still got involved, so I'm around 16, committed a burglary, that was my first case. Ended up having my sentence where if I served time on probation, then I would have my record expunged. I was able to do that. But I went through this battle of like straddling the fence where I was 1 foot in the streets, 1 foot in school. So like I graduated from high school on time. I did all my work. I was an athlete. I went to college right after high school, but I just always had that 1 foot in, and a lot of it is because that seed was planted when I was little, and then it took root later in my life. So, ended up coming back from college, dropping out, getting involved in the streets, and this is where, my main case kind of happened, where I was charged with possession and manufacturing cocaine and selling cocaine, and was sentenced to 1 year in the county jail with 4 years probation, and if I messed up, I would serve 10 years. I messed up, and one of my people that read my book, she was like, "You was going through these waves, and I was just rooting for you," and I'm like, "Man, why does he keep getting in trouble?" Same thing Carl kind of talked about. The same environment in which I left, I returned to the same environment. Nothing changed, right? Community-wise, externally. And nothing changed really internally in me as well. Jail wasn't as scary for me. I was still local, my parents could come see me, I could get visits, and it didn't really sit on me, right? But when I messed up, I ended up going to prison, and now I'm 3 hours away, 4 hours away. Now it's a little bit different. Now I'm going through a process that I didn't go through in jail, where I got to get stripped naked every time I move to a facility. Now it's dawning on me like, man, how did I end up in this place? And I often talk to people about like, the worst parts about prison. People think gangs, violence, and all of that, right? The worst part about prison for me was none of that. I'm a fairly large guy, I can handle myself, right? The worst part was the mental torment you kind of face when you think about all the people that was rooting for you, all the people that was trying to steer you in the right direction. So fast forward, return to 2013, struggles again. And one of the main struggles or barriers was employment. And that barrier was when I would go and try to get a job, once they ran the background check, I would be dismissed. And here's the thing, y'all heard of temporary agencies? So I would go through a temp agency. At the 90-day mark, they like to move you into the company. But at that point, you gotta run a background check. So you can get through QPS or whatever. Once they run, at the 90-day mark, once they run the background check, now you deny. So you lose the temporary job, the real job, and now you're back to square one. I did that 3 times, and I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? I'm about to just go back to what I was doing before. Right? Luckily, I had support around me, and the biggest thing that I had going was my son was on the way. So finally got a big opportunity at Red Robin, started my career or my job there, and then while working there, I walked into the WIC office. If you read my book, you'll read about it, but I got a volunteer opportunity. That volunteer opportunity turned into a job, 10 hours a week, then full-time, started a movement here in Kenosha, using my same negative influence, but now I had transitioned over to positive. And recruiting fathers, and these fathers are all fathers that I used to run the streets with. Now we talking about real life fatherhood, being there for our kids. And over the course of working at my job, they had me speaking across the country. My first speech was in front of 600 people. you know, talk about like getting started, right? So I realized that I had a gift, and you know, I wasn't afraid to speak. As y'all see, I'm up here running my mouth now. My dad is a pastor, and so the apple don't fall too far from the tree. But because of that, I was able to make some transitions in my life. I was able to gather and have a community of support around me, make connections, and you know, I was able to get taken off parole 4 years early. I was able to get a pardon and have my record totally wiped off. I was able to go back to college at Carthage College and on a full ride scholarship. I was able to be a professor over at UW Parkside and teach criminal justice. I was able to do all these things, and then finally, you know, I was able to leave my job. But I'll tell y'all this, and I'll leave it here. When I got into entrepreneurship, I had to be so sure that this is what I wanted to do, because I knew, and I still feel like it, even though I've been pardoned, even though I got this amazing story, that I have to make this ship continue, because I will never get another lucky opportunity like I got at the Racine Kenosha Community Action Agency. So as I'm working and speaking, and y'all see me hustling, and like I know I gotta make it happen, because if I try to go back, it's gonna be hard to get another job. And so I used to think that it was a problem with me when I came back after prison and as I went through the reentry process. But what I realized over time is it's not a problem with me, it's a problem with society.
Well, dang, they like hard stories to follow. So my name is Hope. I am not from Racine or Kenosha. I am originally from a little town called Maywood, Illinois. I grew up there, and I would be lying if I said I didn't grow up in a family that loved and adored me. I was spoiled, I was sheltered, and I grew up in a family that required that you go to school and you have excellence. Like, it was unacceptable to not bring home good grades. It just was not what our family allowed. So I got married really young. I got married at 18. I had 2 children from that marriage. I have a 32-year-old daughter and a 28-year-old son. So what I found is that after I had gotten married, I hit about 22, and I realized I didn't want to be married anymore, that I hadn't got to live any free time, any life. I grew up sheltered, so anything that I came in contact that was new was, I wanted to be a part of that. So when I didn't start my criminal life very young, I started at about 26. And I had already had a career, I had been married, I had children, and I went out partying one night, and I met some people, and I went back home with them, and I was completely amazed. Like, so I'm listening to their story, and they're like, yeah, like, I'm like, nobody in here has a job? So you just stay home all day and nobody has a job. And I thought that was like so exciting. I was like, huh, you know, but nobody told me that they were doing drugs, selling drugs, and going to jail. You know, nobody told me that that was how they were living. So as a person, when I was in 3rd grade, they introduced the Dare to Be Different program. So I was well aware of drugs and that you should not use drugs. And in the midst of knowing these people, I got introduced to heroin. And once introduced to heroin, my life took a major shift. So when I started using heroin, my kids were 3 and 6. CPS entered my life, and they went to live with their father when they were 8 and 5. So from the ages of 3 and 6 to 14 and 17, I used heroin. And I went in and out of prison. It is said that, in a group of dysfunctional people, sometimes you're the most functional out of those dysfunctional people, and that became very addicting to me. I liked, telling people what to do while we were all doing the same thing. So as I started to enter the criminal justice system, at first I was like, oh my goodness, like they handcuff you everywhere, you only get one outfit. Like it was just, I was like, this cannot possibly be. And I would meet women that would be like in the holding cell, and they would tell me, ma'am, if you don't stop doing what you're doing, one day they're gonna really take you to the county jail. Well, I didn't really believe that because I was educated, I had been raised well. They're not gonna take me to the county jail. And then they finally did. And I started to adjust to the criminal justice system because once again, I was dysfunctional, but functional in the group setting that I was in. So I kind of liked that. I was in the county jail. My mom, who, it's funny because she loved me and adored me, and she became my major enabler. She would, no matter where they sent me, my mom would come. And for those of us who have been inside, they have people that they call jail rich, and I would always be jail rich because my family would get happy when I would be in custody because they knew that for a little while I would be safe, that I wasn't using, and the next week they were going to get to see me. And so once I started going to the county jail, eventually somebody said, you're going to end up going to the Illinois Department of Corrections. Not me. They don't send people like me to the prison. Well, needless to say, now I just want to say I didn't start using until I was 26. By the time I hit 29, I had already been to prison twice. Now, in Illinois' prison system, which is very different from the Wisconsin prison system, you could go to prison multiple times in a small amount of time. And I decided, I went to treatment once, and I decided that wasn't for me. I didn't want to take a spot from somebody who really wanted to be sober. I didn't want to be sober. I liked using drugs. I had no responsibility. I made myself believe that my kids were fine. They're with their father. They're fine. They don't need me because who needs a mom that's an addict? So I kept telling myself that story, and I kept telling myself that story, and I decided one day, you know what, I really have to get sober. So I left Illinois and came to Wisconsin, and I moved to Milwaukee. And I'm going to say, that was probably one of the best and worst decisions I ever made. So I was in Milwaukee maybe a year, and I ended up coming to Racine, and I came to Racine, and I had gotten a new, not Kenosha. I came to Racine and into the Wisconsin criminal justice system. And so I'm talking to my attorney, and she's telling me, well, their offer is 2 years, one year in confinement and 1 year on extended supervision. And I said, the whole year? Like 12 months, like to get, no ma'am, that's not, I don't want to do that. And she says, well, you don't have many choices. So I went off to prison, and that was September of 2010. So September 10th of 2010 was my final day using drugs. They took me into custody that day, and then I went off to the prison November 2nd of 2010. And all of a sudden I grew up, because in Wisconsin prison, I didn't know anybody. I had never been in a place where it was just me. I wasn't, like Sharmain said, I was no longer a few hours from home. And my mom had finally kind of was just like, I don't know what to do with you, so I give you back to God. Because who in the right mind goes to prison in 2 different states? So I figured out now, like, something's going on, like I gotta do something different. So I get out of prison here, and I realize that when you have an addictive personality, once the drugs are gone, your true addictions come out. And I have become addicted to the lifestyle that I got accustomed to living. I was addicted to criminality now. So I never went back to using drugs. I was doing pretty well. And then I decided I'm not going to commit any crimes in the state of Wisconsin because they may send me to prison for life. So I decided to cross state lines, go back into Illinois, and commit a new crime in the state of Illinois.
Where's your book?
That was not my brightest decision. And at all those times going in and out of prison, I had never been in prison more than a year. Okay, and I know for some people that's not a very long time, but this time they didn't make me. I had to sit in Cook County Jail for 10 months. I went in sober and people looked different. The cells looked different, the bugs seemed to have gotten bigger, and I'm kind of exaggerating on the bugs, but they were big. And Wisconsin had the opportunity to, kind of, it's like, well, maybe she has mental health problems. We're gonna try to send her to mental health court. But I'm really not a resident anymore of Illinois. I'm a resident of Wisconsin. So that was a no, and off to Illinois prison I go again. But this time, I knew something was different. I wasn't gonna do this again. So I call it the internal switch. It was flipped up, and my uncle, while I was in, he sent me a picture of my kids. They were almost grown up. I hadn't seen my kids in 5 years. They were 9 and 12 the last time I saw them. They were 14 and 17. And I looked at my babies, and they had grown up without me. I realized in that instance that my son was 14 years old and I had never taken him to school. So I said to myself, when I get out of here, I'm going to take some time for myself and get myself together and return to my kids. So I got out, I didn't have anywhere to go, and they put me in the shelter. And I had never been to a shelter. So I stayed there 9 months, and I started school, and I went home to Illinois to see my son. And he said, Mom, when I was like 3, you used to say, don't talk to strangers, and you're a stranger, so I'm not going to talk to you. And if physically my breath could have been sucked out of my body, it was sucked out. So it took my son 6 years to finally start talking to me, 10 years to see me face to face. And my daughter saw me just to talk about what an awful mother I was. But I will say, fast forward, I went to Gateway and I got a Associates of Human Services. I also got a full ride to Carthage and got a social work degree. And then I'm in the midst of getting my master's of criminal justice because it fits what I do. I help men and women coming out of the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, and knowing that when you love your job, it is not really a job. And it's amazing to see the full circle. Now my kids are 28 and 32, and I cannot get them away from me. But they won't give me any grandbabies yet.
Thank you very much. You guys have answered a lot of the questions that we had during your conversation, but we have a few more, so just wanted to ask you, just to make sure I understand. When you went in and were incarcerated, you indicated that you indicated you had children. Carl, Sharmain, when you went in, did you have family or your own at that time when you went in?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I went in, I had a little girl, she was a little over a year old, and a son who had not popped out yet. And so my experiences with them when I released was similar to what Hope said. But they're 26, 25 now. And so I have a set of adults, and I have a 23-month-old and a 4-month-old at home now. And so I transitioned. I tell people all the time, I appreciate who I am today. I appreciate that I've found a way to make all that work for me. But it costed too much. And that cost was paid by my little people.
Yeah, and tell us about the transition from not being around your family to all of a sudden you're with the family. How hard was that to do when you first got out of prison?
Well, I would say, I guess I'm holding the mic, so I'll go first. For me, it was about them thinking, when was the other shoe going to drop? And when was I going to go back? And there was no need to make any major investments in me as a person, emotionally speaking, because it was only going to be a matter of time before I go back, because that's what your type of guy does. And I had no idea what they were talking about until month 10, month 11 hit me, and I'm like, oh, this is what they're talking about. But I tell people all the time, I'm a person of faith, I'm a Christian, and you better be careful what you promise God when you're in prison, because He might hold you to it. And I made, some of those promises, like, Lord, if you get me out of this mess, I'm going to do everything you say, I'm not going to waver, I'm not going to buckle. And, God held me to that in month 3, month 5, month 7. I'm like, I should just do something else. But I'm like, well, I told the Lord that He got me up out of there, because I've seen people, pass away in prison, not make it home from prison. And so I was fortunate to have that option. And so even though I struggled with my family connections, I had some time with my kids when I came home, and then it got complicated because of my exes, because I had 2 kids by different people. That was a struggle that I had to figure out how to navigate with words and not actions. I had to figure out how to avoid frictional type of confrontation, and I did, but it came at a cost, and that cost was, again, me looking like I wasn't fighting hard enough to be with my kids. It looked like I was unwilling to do what it took to be with them, and I was like, that's not it. I can't just show up at your house because I feel like it. Stuff like that.
So for me, I had a bonus daughter when I went in. So my girlfriend then, my wife now, my stepdaughter was 7. And so I was in her life, but not really like in her life, if you know what I mean. So she was 7, I meant to say. So when I came back in 2013, February, my wife was pregnant in April, so excited to see her, obviously, right? So during that entire time that I was going through these struggles, I knew that I had my first biological son on the way. And for me, that was the icing on the cake for me to where that switch kind of flipped, where I told myself I refuse to allow my son to go through some of the same hardships that I went through with my father. Now, I was fortunate that my father kind of caught me. Even though I went through everything I went through, it could have been worse. I got people that's no longer here and doing life in prison that we was like best friends growing up, but I refuse to be out of my son's life, because as I was going through the journey of transition and learning, and discovering new books and going to get my education, I'm like, oh, it's a wicked world out here. So I have to do everything in my power to make sure my son avoids those obstacles that I went through, and that drove every decision that I made, everything that I do. Even if he's not there physically looking, I got a set of principles that my son is always watching. And now I have two biological sons, and my daughter as well, who's 20. You know, being an added father in her life, she's already experiencing fatherlessness from her dad. So I can't be another person to come in and disappoint. And so in my work with fathers, I saw that often, you know, guys in and out of prison, and sometimes it can seem as if they don't care about their children, but they do, they just don't know how to change the way in which they've been taught to think, the way in which they've been taught to think to earn money, the way, if they're not exposed to new information, they'll most likely continue down that same path. So, when I'm working with fathers and dealing with a guy that you kind of wonder, like, bro, you just got out of jail, you talked about your kids in the group, because I was running it for 5 years, you came back, it's like, what is it? And a lot of times they can't really explain it. So, having a kid changed my life, and I try to get the people that I talk to realize that, like, that should typically be the anchor to the reason why you change.
You mentioned, Sharmain, that you're not on parole anymore. I remember from our last conversation with you, Carl, you mentioned that you were still on probation when you were out. Are you still on probation at this point?
Yeah.
And how about you, Hope?
No,
Okay.
I'm up for a pardon from Illinois in January.
Okay, but you were on probation at one point, and you were at some point you were on. So talk to us a little bit. Tell us, what were some of the barriers that you faced while you were on probation? I remember Carl telling an interesting story about leaving home every day, not knowing what's going to happen when you left home. So kind of tell us what it's like to be on probation when you first get out of prison, and some of the difficulties that you face.
Okay, I'll take this one. So, just the difference between probation and parole. Probation is generally you haven't been to prison yet. So you can get probation and you either went to jail or you got time served, or that was just your sentence. Once you go to prison and come back, now you're on parole or extended supervision. So while I was inside, I did what's called a boot camp program, military-based boot camp program. Changed my life, changed the way I think. Physical training every day, run 2 miles in less than 15 minutes, pull-ups, all of that. When I returned, I had a nice amount of money on my books from people sending me money, plus some of the money I had when I went in, about $3,000. One of my first experiences with my first agent was, he told me that, so the check, when it's sent to your agent, but it's in your name, but your check, the agent gets your check first, just so I'm clear. So he knows how much money I have now. So he tells me that I need to pay up my supervision fees for the entire year. And when you hear something funny, you're like, I know that can't be right. Right. Like, how am I supposed to support myself? Housing, new clothes. I probably lost 40 pounds in the boot camp program. I didn't wear the same size. All the other expenses, travel, if I had to pay somebody for a ride. And so I refused. And he basically told me, well, you run the risk of going back to jail if you don't do it. I'm like, that can't be right. So in the moment, I said, all right, I'll bring it back. So he had to give me my check, and I had to go cash it and bring it back to him. When I went to go cash my check, I told my wife, my girlfriend, and my wife now, like, yeah, I ain't going back, right? And so I did go back, to my next visit, and I gave him $100 and left my money in the car, and I told my girlfriend, if you see the police pull up, I'm going to jail. Because although I'm a felon, although I went through this situation and whatever, got to pay my debt to society, I still got dignity. And so this was one of the first challenges. I'm like, I'm already about to go back to jail. But I told him I'll give you 100 and you can call whoever you need to call. So he brought the supervisor in. She confirmed or basically rolled with what he said, and I just told him, like, look, I'm ready to go to jail if that's the case. I know y'all can't send me back for too long. So I'm sitting there, and about 20 minutes go by. Finally, the secretary comes and tell me, like, you can leave. And I'm like, okay. I called their bluff. After that, the redistricting kind of happened, and then I moved over to the parole office on Birch Road, and I got a totally new parole officer, and this was probably the best experience I ever had. Her name was Barb Corfin. She was much more motivational. The guy I had before, because we started off rocky, he was petty, he was punitive, he would pop up on me, you know, out of nowhere, which that's his job, but the new agent was much more, to my liking, much more supportive, and I felt like she was on my side, so I did what I had to do to make her job easy, I guess.
So tell me about some of the fears you had while you were on parole once you got out.
So the biggest thing, the biggest thing is, you know, something called technical violations. And, you know, what I just explained was a technical violation. So some of my biggest fears was like me not even doing something, but maybe somebody calling my agent and saying that I did something. Because you can go back to jail just for allegations alone. Another one was going back to jail because I wasn't able to get a job. That's one of your requirements. Or another one was I got a job, but I'm not able to finish the program, the treatment program that they put me in. And when I go tell my agent, they say, well, we want you to have a job, but treatment comes first. So I gotta deny the job or figure out some kind of way to work third shift and figure it out. So those were just some of the small fears that I had.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I still have some of this to speak about. To Sharmain's point, that's spot on. And one of the things that isn't well known is that boot camp is a treatment program. It is an intense treatment program, and in order to be released through boot camp, you have to be successful at it. And so to turn around and then be pushed to take another treatment program as if that first one didn't work is something to be paying attention to. And also over the priorities of putting your feet on the ground and trying to put some money in your pocket so that you can become stable. And having already heard my story of how hard it is to get a job, to have a job that will keep you and retain you is something that should be prioritized of the person who is in transition. And oftentimes it's not. And so my struggle is that, one, I've been home almost 10 years, I'm still on paper. And part of that is because I got a lengthy sentence on the front end. And we are now in a time frame in Wisconsin where sentences can't be changed by the community corrections office, when once upon a time it could. The people who were monitoring you could say, well, we don't need to monitor you anymore. We're gonna sign off on you going about your business because we have pressing matters to attend to. That legally isn't the case anymore with a thing called truth and sentencing. And in the parole era, that was the case. Now, the difference is pretty clear, and I'm gonna be clear. We use probation, parole, and supervision, all those terms interchangeably, but they're very different things. And in Wisconsin, we currently have truth and sentencing. We've had it since 2000, and you get 2 sentences under truth and sentencing, which is what Darryl was talking about in the past. I've spoken about. One of those sentences is solid and static, and it won't move. Once you've done that time, you've done it. The other is dynamic, and that dynamic is in extended supervision. You can do almost all of your supervision time in this era. A hiccup happened. They will take that person into custody, freeze that time, and then reset it. And that can happen over and over again. Why? Because in our state currently, the only thing that qualifies as time served that they can't take back from you is time spent in a facility. And that is the law, that is in statute, and they hold to that. It doesn't have to be the case, but it is almost always the case when they take a person's street time. So I often describe it as taking a plane from Japan and flying across the pond to California. Once you, and there's a whole analogy that goes along with that, but suffice it to say, once you get past a certain point, once you get past the halfway point and flying across the ocean, you cannot turn around. You have to keep going because you don't have enough gas to turn around. And if you try to turn around, in the water you go because you won't make it. And so I tell the story often that either you do it all or it doesn't count. And so if we're talking about a person on paper for 5 years, for 10 years, for 20 years, and at year 18, that can be reset. We have a very practical and fundamental problem in our system. We also have an issue where somebody who has a year or two to do in that supervision category will throw their hands up and say, you know what? All these technical violations, all this nitpicking, all of this robbing me of my dignity, with trying to subordinate me because I messed up, and you're not acknowledging the programming that I've taken, you're not acknowledging the fact that either that worked or didn't. I'd rather just go back and do all my time and be done with this. I don't have the ability to do that, so here I am in year 10, serving my time still, and still courageously having conversations like this one, challenging the system, having courageous conversations about what it means to build a life in a community and hold the community accountable and the system that supposedly works for that community accountable as well. Because with all honesty, I can't be an asset to my community and a risk, a danger to my community at the same time. You don't get to have it both ways.
A question that I have is, when you were in prison, did you find it to be a rehabilitative process, or did you think it more as a punishment? Did you know, not just you, but at the whole system, how do you see prison?
I don't think that it's a rehabilitative system. I think it's more about compliance. And compliance does not produce change. You know, they can sit us most people can get through a prison sentence, but it is almost set up to come back because there isn't anything in place to allow us to do better. Like if your mindset is already there, then no, it's not, you can get through there and come out and make changes. But for the people in there that need a little bit more nurturing so that they can rehabilitate, it's just not there. You know, there's, in most institutions, there's no programming for people who have long sentences. Whereas if I've been committing crimes half my life, then I should be allowed into programming way before it's time for me to come home so that I can start making these shifts. And that's just not there.
And I second that. I would say it's not rehabilitative from a design perspective, you know, from the prison. It can be rehabilitative from an individual perspective. There are components that can be rehabilitative, like I mentioned, the boot camp program was intense treatment, but the reward was, you know, I get to come home early. You know, you do 6 months and however much time you have left is added on to your parole or your extended supervision. So, like I said, there can be some elements that are rehabilitative, but sometimes I believe there's a one-size-fit-all approach. And I always joke about, like, I was in prison and they had the education program and I go in there. Mind you, I went to college already, but I go in there and the subject is like learning the 50 states, you know. The math is like stuff that I've been through already. So like I wasn't assessed to see where I'm at educationally already so that I can be put in somewhere else. So because of that, if you don't go to that class during that time, you gotta stay in your cell. I just stay in my cell than to go to that class where I'm not really getting rehabilitative services. And as Carl said, a lot of times when you got a lengthy sentence, you can't get into your program until you have 18 months left. And so let's say a guy got 5 years. He serves 3.5 years before he's able to go into the programming that he needs when he comes back. What happens in the meantime? You learn how to be a better criminal. I'll never forget I saw a guy with a tequila bottle in prison. I saw marijuana, anything you can get on the streets is in there, right? So the question becomes like, do you involve yourself with those kind of things or do you stay away from it? Are you fortunate to go to a DAC program or a boot camp program where you can be completely away from it? Or do you have to fight the same temptations that you do on the street, trying to stay on the straight and narrow as you do outside, inside? So when you dive into those situations and scenarios inside, you learn who the connection is in Illinois or Milwaukee, and you just create a bigger network with no disruption from the design of the programming at the prison.
So I'll chime in right there, and then I'll pass it back and say it's both. At least it can be both. And I say that respectfully because there are a lot of programs that are lifted up. There are a lot of programs that are talked about by DOC officials, and there are programs that they will say they offer to people. And what I say to that is those programs are offered or able to be taken by maybe 10% of the population. Those programs, you can't be vetted to be a part of for a couple different criteria reasons. One, and the main one is like Sharmain said, time. Because of their continuum of care philosophy, you are going to get your programming as close to the door as possible. And if the door or release date is 25 years from now, then you got a long way to go. And you're going to have to figure it out in the meantime. So there's that. There's also the fact that for me, and like I said, I'm not in the low-hanging fruit category of convictions histories. And so I put that alongside with the governor and the previous governors talked about when it said that the majority of people who are in prison have violent convictions and violent conviction records. But the programs that are then offered up are not for that category of people. They're not substantive, and in terms of options, they're not recognized as mitigating factors and circumstances once you take them. So even if this 2/3 of the population take programming that they probably can't get into, it still won't change their current circumstance. It still won't change the fact that it's been acknowledged that some of the finest professionals money can buy designed the program, gave it to you, and you still have to sit for another 6, 7, 8 years. And so it bottlenecks in this particular way, and the only opportunities in opening the door comes to those in the smallest categories who are leaving in 6 months, 9 months anyway. So that is one of those things that I talk to the governor often about. I'm like, look, we need to be honest about the fact that the way that the system currently operates is that it adheres more to political goals than it does rehabilitative ones. And so you don't get the opportunity to hold the system accountable to what it says it's gonna do once it offers you the program. And you check all the boxes and you're successful in that program. You don't get to get your personhood back because you're working towards your personhood, full freedom. And if you can't get your full freedom back, then it just means that there are more people going into the system than out of it. And of course, you're gonna need more prisons and more beds.
And so all three of you actually have a reputation for working with incarcerated people as they come out of the prison system. But are there programs, this is one of the questions I was asked, are there programs in place that assist prisoners when they come out of prison and into re-entering society? Is there any programs like that that you're aware of?
So I work in one of those programs. So our main function is to help people stay out of prison by cognitive intervention. You change your mindset, you'll change your behavior. And our program is open-ended. There is not an end date to it. In Racine, it is primarily voluntary. In Kenosha, it's mandatory. So it's mandated by their agent, and they can come, and the first year is mandatory, and then after that, they can still have our services without the mandation. We are aligned with the Department of Community Corrections. We do not work for the Department of Community Corrections.
And is it government funded or is it run mostly by grants?
It is run mostly by grants.
So really that's the question I'm asking. Does the government have any kind of programs that when the prisoner comes out of prison that they can go to help them re-enter society?
So, as the former vice president of this organization that she's speaking of, I'm going to say that, yes, the government has programs to do that. No, those programs aren't well funded. Those programs don't hit enough people. RVM, which is Racine Vocational Ministries, and KVM, Kenosha Vocational Ministries, are thought of as the reentry programs for this region. But there are official DOC and community corrections, which are the same thing for those people who don't know. There's a DCC, Community Corrections, is the Division of Community Corrections, and they're part of DOC. They have an official reentry program called Windows to Work. They've got a couple of different programs called ORS, you can look that up. There are a couple of different programs, but those programs, you have to thread the eye of the needle in order to get into them. I tried to get into Windows to Work early. The social worker gave me false information at the prison I was at. By the time I made it to a prison for a social worker that would help you do that, which was a 2-year program, help you get a job, help you get a place, follow you for 2 years. Once I got to a place that would allow me to take part in that program, they said I was too late. I missed my window. There are also programs, but but I don't think that's the big question. The big question is that there are programs in the community that aren't well funded. They can't get the funding that we're talking about, and they aren't recognized by departments of corrections and community corrections that this program has the ability to change a person, and that is recognized by taking that person off the roster. Like, that is for me where the rubber meets the road. I've heard of DOC and I've seen and read about them talking about many programs, both in prison and community corrections. But those programs talk about, I want to say, conditions of confinement. Because in our state, you get 2 sentences. Prison is incarceration, supervision is incarceration. And the programs that they promote talk about the conditions of those confinements. Not, we put tools in this person's hands so that they can exit these confinement scenarios. And I almost hear nobody calling them on that, because that's what we need to relieve overcrowding in prisons and overcrowding in community corrections systems. And we don't have that. And we don't have that because those are political conversations more than they are economic ones. And they should be both.
And I just want to do a paid advertisement here. There's plenty of food back there, so make sure you're facing this way so nobody's going to be watching you while you're eating. So go ahead and enjoy yourself. And also, I'm running out of questions here, so if you have a question, please hold your hand up and they'll come by and grab it and we'll read your question. Okay, so there are invisible barriers that are written into the laws and policies that restrict people from doing everything they're required to do, i.e. employment, housing. What is the key to anyone's success if they want to avoid these types of barriers? Because they're in front of you when you first got out. You mentioned that earlier when you first got out there, how hard it was for you to find a job. So if someone's coming out of prison, what are some of the barriers that they might well must be prepared to expect to see when they get out of prison?
So we mentioned the employment, that's the obvious one. But another huge one is housing. There's a lot of red tape in the areas of housing. One of the main ones being if you have a felony conviction, generally you cannot go through like a property management company. Before you even get an opportunity to say how you change and the life you live in now, you're gonna be screened out, with computers. I went through that situation, and this is while I was out in the community and running the program. I was still on parole. I'm coming to property owners, because I figured it out. I couldn't go through the property management company. I had to find individual owners, right, through the newspaper. And I'm going to them and I'm presenting myself. I'm nothing short of begging, right? Also, the reason why I had to do this because when I married my wife, not really thinking too much in it, I had a studio apartment and we shared, and she had an apartment through housing. When she married me, she got a notification from the property manager that because she's married to a felon, she can no longer be in the apartment complex. So we had about a month to figure out our next step. Now my dad was in my life, and we had a decent location, but we had a family now. So I'm going around showing my newspaper clippings and telling people how great I am. No, every time. So to overcome that, you have to find a network of people. This is a call to action to you all. Like when we think about programming and finding that support system, that's what I had to do, word of mouth, through other felons. Hey, call this number. He know me, they'll accept you. But the ultimate thing you have to do is, when I went in and got my first house in 2019, guess what questions they didn't ask? Are you a felon? And they want to give you that big debt, right? But it's one of those you either sink or swim kind of situations. So somebody going through, they swimming at the time, more than likely they don't go swim. They don't got somebody to throw them a lifeline or some kind of help. So those are some of the barriers that might be different from employment.
Sure. So, a couple things. Once you're on the other side of a conviction, you are a second-class citizen because of your felonious status. If you're still on paper, you are literally a diminished person. And until you come from under that, you are in this diminished capacity status, which means you are incredible high risk in a couple different areas. Try getting life insurance while still on paper. You will either get a number that you cannot afford, or you won't get a number at all because you are too high a risk. Try getting a loan for a house or a car, and they will tell you that you either have to accept these ridiculous terms or we won't give you terms. And it is because it is acknowledged that you're still tied to the system, and we know, and we also acknowledge to you that the system pulls people back and forth for reasons that for us don't make sense, but it makes sense to somebody. And so for that reason, we can't extend to you lines of credit. We can't extend to you this option because you're not a safe bet. If you were a safe bet, they would acknowledge that and be done with you. And a lot of people actually believe that, and that's just not accurate, it's just not true. The hard part in that for me is that I've explained this a couple of times, and I said this testifying in front of the Senate committee probably about 6 months ago, and I said that the way supervision works is it's a lot like buying a house or trying to buy a house in the Jim Crow era, where you couldn't get a loan, but you could get a land contract, and a land contract doesn't come with equity attached. And so you could buy this house with no equity whatsoever, spend 5 years worth of payments on a a 15-year house, miss one payment and have to start back over. And so because you can't build equity in the buying of this house, you can't participate in the American dream because it's built on that. It's built on being able to have equity in these different places. And I said, this is the social version of that, being on paper. If you miss one payment, AKA pick up on paper, and they take all that time back and reset it, you do not allow a person to buy back their personhood. It is not acknowledged that that's a real thing. And they gasped when I said it, because I was making the connection to say that we've participated in this kind of system before. We know this ain't right, and we know that this is ugly with fundamental consequences for us all, and you all are still letting this happen. I'm not gonna stand for it, tied to you or not. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm not gonna blink. I'm just gonna deal with what comes with it. But that, for me, is a struggle, because now I have two little people. I wanna get major insurance, and because I'm still on paper, I still can't. And the reason why I'm still on paper are political reasons and nothing more. Because I've already checked all the boxes. I've already done all the work. And as you said, I'm well known for this, and I still wake up one day at a time with an anxiousness on my heart that I have to figure out how to defensively drive when I walk out my door.
Okay, did you want to say something? No. Okay, we're going to transition to some of the questions from the audience. First question is, Mr. Harris mentioned in his book that he worked 90 days, had a felony check, and was then let go. Are there any companies, or could a job site be developed that would pay and keep convicted felons? Have you heard of anything like that?
Short answer, no. I mean, there's sites called felonyfriendlyjobs.com. I hear about some of those, but that's one of the things that, conversations I was having when I was working at the WIC office with some community leaders. Like, we gotta find a way to get employers to recognize this. Now, I will say this, let me take a step back. What is it? LMI packaging, they do something where guys come from the prison, I believe. KCC has programs where they come from the prison and work. But often what I hear with some companies is they can work for them while they was through that program, but once they come out and try to apply like as a regular person, they run the risk of getting denied. So I do not have a lot of resources or knowledge about that, but that is a conversation, a courageous conversation that we should be having.
Okay, one of the things that Hope and I were talking about before we started the panel was men and women being released from prison is a little different, because whereas a black male may encounter racism, a female obviously encounters racism and sexism. Did you experience any of that?
When for a brief period, I worked for Racine County. I did an internship with behavioral health. And once I was done with the internship, they hired me. But then as the higher ups found out about my background, all of a sudden I wasn't a good fit. And I wouldn't necessarily call it racism as I would bias and stereotype that I wasn't a safe employee. And I think I had more of that than anything. Like, you know, when I applied at UW, they didn't want me as a student because I wasn't a safe student. You know, when I say that I feel like men and women face different things, I think overall women are looked at as safer. However, you know, society looks at women like they should not be in the criminal justice system, and that in itself is a barrier because you carry the shame and guilt of I'm a felon and I'm a woman, and now people don't respect me the same because maybe I wasn't a great mother, maybe I didn't take my family values, and you know that affected me more than anything. Like co-workers knowing that I'm a felon, or fellow students knowing I'm a felon, and you know, making weird comments about the criminal justice system, knowing that I walked through that system. You know, that was a bigger effect on me.
And so, Carl, as a release date nears, what kind of preparation does the prison system provide?
It used to provide, and it was a priority, it was an economic priority, the reentry program. And for those who work in the system, there were blue folders, and there were 10 programs. Fun fact, there was material within at least 2 of the modules that I wrote personally, that I don't talk about much, but that used to be the priority in the Smart on Crime era, which was in the 2000 era. Once we moved away from that, that program that was mandatory in the transition, and I was one of the facilitators and tutors for that program in that era when I was in prison, so I know it pretty well. It stopped being well funded by the federal government and by the state, and then it became a voluntary program, then an optional one. Then it fell to the wayside. The materials that they prioritize so much now sit on a library shelf somewhere that you can pick up if you want, but that's it.
Okay, I have a 3 more questions. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but I'm not sure who this is addressed to, but it could be addressed to all of you. It says, any suggestions for where online or at other events we can learn more about your work? I'm not really sure who you're addressing that to, but all of them are working with formerly incarcerated prisoners. So.
Well, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to promote myself. Sharmain has his books here, and he is here. So, for those who want to learn more about his story that he talked about, powerful story, powerful dude, you get a chance to get that from him. To know about, SharmainHarris.com, also that. And we laugh, but this is one of the things that from years ago I've been promoting, because I knew my man was in a category where he could get quicker opportunity than I. I've been promoting him for years, like he should be off, he should be done, he should get a part. I've been promoting him for years, like even though I don't qualify for those things, I fight for my people because this is a collective fight. This is a collective action. So this is not new. This is why we're shutting up. My work, I work as, I have a fancy title at an organization called Community. My title is called Director of Correcting the Narrative. And we talk about how it's about correcting the narrative and not shifting the narrative. And the example I use most is that when you go to court, it's pretty clear that the narrative is important because anytime something happens in court, the judge stops the whole proceeding and he leans to the stenographer and asks him or her to correct the record. Like, because that would just happen for me to erase that because that's not going to be a part of the record. The record is the narrative. And so we know how powerful and important the narrative is. We also know that a case lives and dies by what's in that record. You can only challenge what's in that record. And if it's not in the record, it didn't happen. We believe that there is one record, one narrative about our community, about our lives, and it's not accurate about people like us. And so we work to correct that narrative. You can take a flyer over at the table to learn about what Correct the Narrative and the community is doing. We have a whole week's worth of events coming up in November. Some of them being a reentry simulation where we talk about a lot of this firsthand. You can check that out. We have an annual celebration where we give awards to people and acknowledge folks who are living these truths that don't get its accolades in the way that we do. We also build partnerships through screenings and panels, discussions around documentaries that highlight stories like ours, but it's to build community conversations so that we can talk about how money is being spent, if it's being done well or not. And those are conversations I believe we have more in common than not.
Tell us a little bit about
Okay, so our Second Chance program, as I said earlier, works with men and women that come out of the Wisconsin Department of Corrections and recently out of the Kenosha County Detention Center's Living Free program. Our main focus is to help people stay out of prison. Our side of the program does not help people find jobs, and our reasoning behind that is that jobs do not keep people from going to prison. Most people are job needy, but not job ready. We have people that have gotten a job and then they have went back to prison because they lost the focus of themselves. We encourage our men and women to take your time getting yourself together, because slow and steady wins the race. We have people come in, we do an assessment that is very similar to the Department of Corrections Compass assessment that will tell us what your risk to recidivate is, and then we build your case management around that assessment. Our program is accessible while you're in the prison or once you come out. We do groups and go to several of the prisons. We do a group at Racine Correctional Institution, and we do MRT at the Young Men's Prison at Ryoc to start helping them with their process prior to getting released.
So a lot of my work is through my company, Sharmain and Associates. I've transitioned from the corporate nonprofit space into my own kind of solopreneur initiative. And currently, recently I launched a book tour based on my book. One second, my annoying nephew. And I'm going and asking prisons to allow me to come in and speak and motivate those inside. And so I'm seeking sponsorship for the books, and it allowed me to come in, offer my services to the prison free of charge, and give out a book to each person inside. So November 11th, I'll be at Racine Youth Correctional Facility. And on top of that, I'm a speaker and a consultant mainly, but I will say this. I kind of had to make this shift. I love the work that we do and nonprofit work, but it's a lot of red tape mixed in all of that too. It's me talking, not them. When you are part of an organization, you might be lit on fire. You trying to make changes, but they like, slow down. We ain't at that point yet. And don't get me wrong, like I know I can be a high level thinker, like, and some stuff might not make sense, but the way in which we take our youth or douse the flame of the youth is counterproductive sometimes in these nonprofit spaces. And I gotta keep it real here. Have my experience with a contract here, county executive, made some arrangements. I had a full-fledged fatherhood program, going thriving for 3 years straight. Funding was snatched from it. I ain't gonna get into all the weeds of all that. People know, if you know, you know. But that's when I got to a point where I told y'all earlier, like I have to do what I'm doing now because I can no longer depend on the people who take my tax dollars that I pay in and then turn around and tell me that my program that's been proven to be valuable and substantive and data and focus groups and all of this stuff to back it up tell me that that's not valuable. So I got out of that space and I'm currently in this space. If you got a school organization, you're looking for a speaker to come in, please reach out, SharmainHarris.com.
Okay, we're gonna wrap this up. I have one last question. Each one of you have 1 minute to answer this question, because we're on a time schedule here. Okay, so what's the best advice you can offer to those who are being released and now re-entering society after serving their time? 1 minute each. Start with you, Sharmain.
Give them a chance to think.
I gave you 10 seconds.
Best advice. I'm gonna just say this. Everything that we just talked about so far, it kind of frustrates you because do we believe in what the system that we built or not? Right, like Carl talked about. We get sentenced once and then we got another sentence. So all these barriers we talk about is like your sentence isn't over. And so the best advice I can give somebody is don't dive into this stigma of a felony conviction, right? That's their problem. It's not our problem. That's society problem. Do we believe we pay the money into the system and pay our taxes and we tell somebody that if you get in trouble and go through this process and change, then we support you. But nobody gets support. So I tell them, don't believe what somebody tells you on the front level, on the surface level. Dig deeper within yourself and believe in yourself and surround yourself with like-minded people who have saw these things already and been able to build themselves up and stand on their shoulders just as much as we stand on the shoulders of giants who allowed us to be in this place that we are right now.
Thank you.
I would say that the goals that you have set for yourself, write them all down. Check off the ones that you've completed, because when you see completed work, it inspires you. Don't allow anybody to steal your dream. Be careful who you tell it to. Piggybacking off of the things that Sharmain said, if you know the system is running exactly how it was made to work, so you have to do everything you can to get yourself and stay out of this modern day slavery, because that is what the system is. So everything that you thought about in prison that you want to do, you got to do it slow and steady. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and know that barriers are meant to overcome.
Man, right on. Touche. I'm a Bears fan, so I'm gonna just say that. I know I'm well received because Kenosha, so I'm just put it out there. But I make this analogy often. I point at football, but I also talk about chess. And in chess, what I learned when I learned to play is that you have an objective seat and a subjective seat. It's easy to watch the game and say, man, he should have made that catch if you ain't never played. That's easy thing to say. It's easy to sit in prison and say, I'm going home next week and I got it figured out. And then go home and realize you do not have it figured out. There are all these uncontrollable variables, unseen variables that happen. And what I learned is that when I was in prison, a lot of guys participated in chess. And so I'm like, okay, I need you to understand that you sitting on the sidelines, you're gonna see the moves that I miss, the moves that this person misses. And then you're gonna sit here, and then your feelings are gonna come into it, you're gonna start sweating, you're gonna go through all the motions in a subjective role. Try your best to keep your objective eye open while sitting in that subjective seat. The only way to really do that and do it well is to do some homework. You have to do due diligence and do some homework. So if there's something you want to do out there, read about it before you go, so that you have some knowledge with you as you walk into it, and that will much better equip you to deal with how you feel in the moment, the barriers that are going to come up, like she said, the biases that show up, because a lot of them show up. There are these distortions about who we are, and they show up as people's biases and the way that they reflect that onto us. You want to do well, put as much knowledge in your kit before you walk out that door as possible.
I want to thank our panel for all the wonderful things that they had to say tonight. They gave us a lot of things to think about, a lot of their experiences, and appreciate you coming in and sitting in front of us and telling us about these experiences. So thank you very much. I'd like to now turn this over to Adeline so she can talk to the call to action.
Adeline Green here. And first I want to say this has been a phenomenal conversation. We appreciate our panelists and the insight and the ideas that they shared with us tonight. So I'd like to give them a round of applause for their wonderful presentation. I'd like to thank everyone who came out tonight on behalf of the Kenosha Coalition for Dismantling Racism. Those who didn't attend, they missed a phenomenal session, as I stated. I want to thank the planners of this courageous conversation, the phenomenal moderator, my husband, and also I want to thank the museum for allowing us to hold these courageous conversations whenever we can hold them. So we appreciate that. I think I learned a lot tonight, and I hope you did too, from the panelists about some of the barriers and challenges that are faced by those who re-enter the community after their release. We've seen from these three examples how people can be successful after incarceration with the right motivation, guidance, and opportunities. There's several takeaways from their personal stories of survival and success, including some actions that we can take to ensure that there are even more success stories that can happen when people are released from prison. First and foremost, I think it's important for us to remember that people who have been on the wrong side of the law, they need second chances, and sometimes they need third chances, and sometimes they need fourth chances. So let's not give up on people who've been incarcerated or judge them based on their past mistakes. Instead, let's try to support them, encourage and advise them so they can make good choices that will keep them on the right path and out of the criminal justice system. I don't know how many of you have read the book by Brian Stevenson, a great advocate for social justice, but I'm reminded from his book, Just Mercy, of a quote which he says, "Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. We all deserve mercy and a future filled with possibilities instead of punishment. We should strive to give hope and help to those who need it." And here's just a few suggestions for some actions that we can all take. I think we can all support the Ban the Box initiative. I know that was around, for a while. And we can advocate for laws that remove criminal history questions from job applications and housing applications. You've heard about some of the challenges that our panelists have had. We can push for expungement of certain criminal records after a period of good behavior by the ex-offenders. We can promote fair sentencing and parole reforms that end lengthy and overly harsh sentences to ensure that parole is fair and equitable. And we can advocate to reinstate voting rights for people with felony convictions who serve their time but still are on probation or parole, on paper, as they said. And additionally, you can make financial donations to organizations that provide programs and services to those re-entering the community after serving their sentences. And they've mentioned a few groups up here already. The Racine Kenosha Vocational Ministries, Birds of a Feather is a local organization here that helps the formerly incarcerated. Pro Se, I believe there's some information on the table back here about that, and Carl mentioned correcting the narrative. And there's other groups out there that help people stay out of prison, find employment, reunite with their families, and improve their overall lives. There are many, as you've heard, economic, legal, and social barriers that ex-offenders will face when they leave the incarceration. And these organizations that I mentioned, that they've mentioned, can help ex-offenders navigate and overcome some of the barriers that they'll face. If you're not able to donate financially, volunteer your time with some of these organizations to help them achieve their missions and their goals. If you can donate items to someone who's been recently released from prison, things that they may need, but they don't have the resources in order to buy them themselves. Things like clothing, furniture, household items, or food, and housing, I heard, was a big issue also. Each of us can make an investment in the outcomes that we want to see. And certainly, last but not least, keep coming to these courageous conversations and encourage your friends to come so that you and they can be enlightened and informed and made aware about some of the challenges faced by people who don't have it quite as good as we do. Let's help even more people break barriers, become empowered, and build better lives for themselves, just like these examples here. We've heard from these three very shining examples of how they have overcome and become successful. So we appreciate the stories from Carl, Hope, and Sharmain. As they shared their journeys with us, we've learned that through the proper guidance and support, through allies and advocacy, through resources and relationships, they've been able to overcome barriers and make valuable contributions to their communities. They are now successful advocates, allies, even at least one author here, and educators, employees, entrepreneurs. And they're also good neighbors, and they're role models for all of us, and we should be very proud of them. I know I am. So thank you again for coming. And I'm going to, with that, turn it over to the next segment of our program, where we're going to have some very special giveaways. Some of you will have the opportunity to get one of Sharmain's books that has been talked about frequently throughout this presentation. So thank you very much again for coming.
And with that recommendation to keep coming to Courageous Conversations, we will be having one January 20th, and you will hear more about it. You sign the sheets coming in with your emails, so we will let you know personally. We also hope that our local news gives us those articles ahead of time as well. So yes, we underscore great program today, the Coalition's mission to identify, expose racism, and we do it through education. And the Coalition, we don't ban books, we bring books. We believe that our books, our self-learning, will help all of us. And Jada has championed collecting books, getting books, and today has a great announcement on our books and drawing. And did anyone need real quick to put their name in? I think I caught most, but I think there was one to collect. I'll come and get that.
Yes, as you've heard throughout the night, but thank you to all of our panelists for your profound testimonies. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight, whether you were just curious or a proud supporter of the Coalition or want to learn more about life after incarceration. We really appreciate it. And once again, thank you to all the Coalition members and to the Civil War Museum for hosting us and their continuous generosity. A new tradition was started by the Coalition about allowing the work to continue in the form of literature. The gift of literature allows attendees to read books that pertain to our courageous conversations or mission in an effort to allow the conversations and growth to keep going even after we leave this space. This year, the gift of literature is extremely special as we get to support an author from our Kenosha community, Sharmain Harris, with his new memoir, Rising Above the Odds, My Journey from Pain and Prison to Power and Purpose. Today, attendees will be able to receive a free, and not just a free copy, a signed copy of his new memoir. And if you are not able to receive a copy today, there's still a way to obtain one by visiting his direct website, sharmainharris.com. When we call your name, please wave your hand and a Coalition member will make sure you receive your copy. Once again, thank you all for attending this evening.
How many
We're giving away 20 copies of his book. Yes, 20 signed copies this evening. Yes. Okay. I pulled my name. This is me. Let's go again.
That's right.
Oh,
So,
okay.
maybe you can hand out the book.
Sharmain. Yeah, let Sharmain go.
Okay.
The first one is me, so.
So we can.
Joan Wilk. Joan.
She's back, and I'll get it to her, she's back, I know, doing a call, so, yeah, she'll love that. Love that, Joan.
Tia Richardson. Tia. Congratulations, Tia. Kenya Mason. Kenya, okay. Congratulations. David Lockwood. David Lockwood, congratulations, David. Let's see. Jim Sinclair. Jim,
Jim Sinclair is here.
okay. Congratulations. Ruth Donald. Yeah, congratulations. We have Linda Jacobson. Linda, congratulations. Kurt Rupp, Mr. Kurt. So we're at 10. We have 10 more copies left.
Okay, we'll see.
Oh, Linda. Yeah, Miss Lydia Isabla. Denison Bureau.
Nice. Pronouncing it right? D-I-N-E-S-E-A, Denison Bureau. She may have left, there were a few. Oh, there we are. Yes.
Denison, okay.
I'm sorry. Please tell us your name. I'm sorry.
Sydney Milan.
She had to leave, I can take hers.
Okay.
Here, we'll put her name.
Mr. Ron Tatum. Pam Drummond. Congratulations, Ms. Pam. We have Dolores John Jackson. Dolores Jackson? Okay.
She's still here, but we can get her to her.
That's a lot of them. Yes.
Let's see, do you have, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 left. Oh, 2. Miss Jackson. 20.
So 6 left.
Gee, I have the first one. Which one? Dolores Jackson. You got Dolores Jackson. Okay. 5 left if we counted right. No one's coming forward right now, so we can keep going. Okay, 5 more.
We have Callie Ward. Callie,
All right.
congratulations. We have Karen Keppinen. Congratulations. Ben Sue.
Is Ben still here? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Ben Sue.
Thank you.
Mr. Ola. And this is going to be our final copy. The final one goes to Ellen Brockhouse. Okay, congratulations. Thank you all so much for attending tonight's Courageous Conversation. There are still refreshments in the back, so please help yourself and safe travels on your way home. Thank you.